Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us again tonight. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Carl Rubin. I'm currently the chairperson of Israel Programming for the Federation of Jewish Men's Clubs, also known as the FJMC. We are an international organization with 20,000 members worldwide. Membership is available as part of your synagogue, and we also offer an individual membership that is open to anyone. Since the tragic events of October 7th, we have initiated a powerful program called Israel on My Mind. Israel on My Mind consists of two components. The first is a personal reflection, where individuals are invited to submit a short piece on their personal connection with Israel. It can be a past experience with Israel, something current, or even something in the future. The key is that it be a personal connection that you have with Israel. We then share many of the reflections with others on our website, which is fjmc.org. The second component of Israel on My Mind is why we are here again tonight. Each month, we present a speaker who has some deep connection to Israel and will share with you their experience. These speakers can range from those with personal experiences, such as our guest tonight, to those living and or working in Israel. We also plan to feature authors or writers with some connection to Israel and those involved with Israeli cooking, art, technology, or sports. If you have any ideas for future guests, please reach out to me personally. Before I introduce our speaker, though, tonight, I'd like to just kind of lay the ground rules to make sure we have a nice, smooth meeting tonight. So bear with me, please, just for a couple minutes. We all want to speak in a respectful manner. There are a lot of strong emotions on all sides of the issues, but we ask everyone to present their views in a positive manner without criticizing anybody else's views. Only those that use the raise hand function and or the question and answer will be recognized and allowed to speak. Anyone who speaks when they haven't been called upon, interrupts others, or tries to have a back and forth discussion or argument with someone will be muted. Repeated actions will lead to being removed from the group. Use the bluff method, bottom line up front. Please state your conclusion up front, then explain it if needed. We ask that each speaker keep their remarks short, preferably around 30 seconds. And once everyone who has had a turn to speak, we will ask those who want to have another opportunity to speak if there is time. So thank you once again for following these guidelines. So our speaker tonight is Alan Budman. Many of you do not need to be introduced to Alan because we're very fond of Alan and know a lot about him. But for those few who don't, Alan Budman is our current FJMC International President. He was born and raised in the Philadelphia area. He's married to Susan. They are the proud parents of Heather, who is married to Chris, and Tracy, who is married to Dustin, and they have two grandchildren too. He is now retired, was previously a lawyer. He also taught at Penn State University for 28 years. He has served as the president of the Associated Alumni of Central High School, was a Big Brother volunteer with Jewish Family Services, vice president of Melrose B'nai Israel, and chair of the Development Committee of the American Heart Association in Philadelphia. He was president of Temple Sinai's Men's Club and the Middle Atlantic region. He is the past co-chair of KRUV Initiative of FJMC, the founder of the FJMC Inclusion Initiative, past co-chair of the Yellow Candle Program, past program convention chair, and past vice president for programs, regions, and training. He's also a Hineni Fellow of the Foundation of Jewish Life. He also happens to be a great guy, and I'm pleased that he is with us tonight to share his thoughts on his most recent trip to Israel. Thank you, Alan.
Well, thank you very much, Carl. Thank you all for being on tonight. It's really a pleasure to see you, and I do really appreciate your being with us tonight. I was pleased to be invited to the World Zionist Organization conference in Israel, in which 800 leaders from around the world were invited to come and meet with very influential people in Israel and to, of course, to meet each other as well. It was at the end of February. It was a two-day trip. It was a very quick trip for me. 4 nights, of which 2 nights were traveling. So it was basically, I was only in Israel for 2 nights. The first day was comprised by the conference, which I'm about to describe to you. And the second day, I will also describe, that was not a conference, that was a little bit of touring, but for a purpose. So let me, at this time, go over some of the highlights of the conference. And again, this is an all-day conference. I've distilled it down to approximately 3 or 4 minutes. Please understand there was a lot more information. The first person we heard from was Major General Heyman of the IDF, and he spoke about the military operations. And he says he understood that the invasion caused extreme anger in Israel, but that it was very difficult to capture or kill all the Hamas leaders. The regime change in Gaza is also very difficult. As to retrieving hostages, they have been separated and very difficult to find, and therefore a long war was designed for 2 years. Again, I'm quoting him. Stage 1 was to prepare for the ground invasion. Stage 2 went to January 16th and reduced the 24 Hamas brigades to 6. Stage 3 is now eliminating the small terrorist cells, still attacking in the Hanas area where Hamas' strongest brigade is. Stage 4 will be rebuilding new government and civil authority for at least 2 years. And again, of course, keep in mind, all the information I'm imparting to you now was as of the end of February. I don't think it's changed, at least the things I've just said have changed dramatically since then. There was also a speaker about social media and the war that's going on there as well. He noted that on October 7, Israel, or after October 7, Israel had support from around the world, but that changed quickly. On social media, facts simply don't matter. It's all about emotion and about visuals and things like that. We can fight back by reminding people about the Hamas attacks and the existing hostages. We should push back on social media. We then heard from IDF spokesperson Admiral Habert, and he explained that when the attacks occurred, IDF was doing intelligence-based events. After the attack occurred, I apologize for that. So they're still working on, again, looking for the hostages, freeing the hostages, and ending the Hamas brigades. We then heard from some other people too, who pretty much said the same thing. We heard from Ambassador Siebert of Germany. He's the German ambassador to Israel, who said that Germany stands loyal by Israel in this dire time, and that Germany's history demands no less. Each country should back Israel against terrorism. The number of innocents killed in Gaza is a serious concern. And many speakers echoed those remarks. There was then a panel discussion about the Israeli spirit. There were several people speaking at the same time, all of whom are in Israel, most of whom were journalists. And the quote I wrote down, which was, I think, the most important, was that, quote, "The Israeli people are the strongest people in the world. That Israelis remain optimistic and rank high as one of the happiest countries in the world. And one must have a sense of meaning to be optimistic. The areas attacked will start to reopen next week." And again, that was the end of February, meaning that in the first week in March, the kibbutzim, the villages, etc., were beginning to reopen. That's not to say that they are even fully reopened now, roughly 7 weeks later, but they have started at least. It was noted that these attacks were the first to be live streamed. Nobody, has seen a war where it was fought while everybody watched. This was designed to demoralize Israel, but it did not happen. The echo again was said earlier about younger people who are on social media aren't really concerned with facts. They're more concerned with feelings. And I am going to give an opinion on that issue a little later. Dr. Micah Goodman spoke. He was a tremendous speaker. I mean, just absolutely spellbinding. He made some very good points, and he said that this war will cause Israel to be recreated just as it was in 1948, and then in 67, and then in 73. Before October 7, Israel was fighting internally. The war brought Israelis together, but going forward, he's assuming that each side will likely blame the other for the occurrence of October 7. And that unity which now exists, which in fact you can now see, has started to fracture already. We then heard from the Honorable President Isaac Herzog, who was, of course, a spellbinding speaker, as you can easily imagine, and his remarks were very, very well received. He emphasized, He emphasized that the top priority is bringing back the hostages and that Israel must continue its normal living activities. He also spoke about anti-Semitism, which he said seems different than in the past, and that many are, rearing their ugly head on college campuses. Jewish schools and students are under attack. People can not wear their mezuzot in public, In fact, many of the speakers spoke about advising people in Israel and in other countries not to wear their kippot while walking around on the street. He asked for prayers for the safe return of the hostages and asked us to keep on demonstrating and writing to papers and social media, etc. We then heard from Rabbi Dov Perez, who has, I believe, spoken in the webinars before. He has a son in the IDF who has been a prisoner of Hamas since the first day. He is concerned that soldiers will be the last to be released and will probably be murdered before that happens. So you can understand, as a father, his feelings. On Wednesday morning, we went by bus to the Hadassah Rehabilitation Hospital. We saw a hastily constructed occupational and rehabilitative therapy area. What they did was they took an enclosed garage. I'm making this up, folks. They took a garage and converted it to hospital rooms. They literally put up temporary walls, brought in all this equipment. They said that when they built the garage, they actually thought that this might occur, and they wired it and had oxygen lines and all the things that a hospital room normally has already on place. So they needed, therefore, to bring in the temporary walls. In Hollywood, they call those the flats, which are temporary walls, and of course the beds, etc., the equipment. But the actual wiring, oxygen lines, all the other things that you normally see in a hospital room were already present in that garage. Amazing forethought on that idea. So they did that, and therefore they were able to have the physical space to treat the wounded, and which, of course, as you can understand, would be very important. We met with a soldier of approximately 40 years old. He was a battalion commander. He was wounded in the arm and has been a patient since October 8. He's there learning to reuse his arm and return to full function. I'm sure by this time he has. After that, we were then taken to Mount Herzl to the Memorial to the Fallen. The memorial is an oval-shaped structure, ultra-modern. And when you walk inside, you are in a large room, which again is oval-shaped. There is an oculus, that's a hole in the ceiling, basically, that lets in natural light. And you go up a ramp. For those of you who've been to the Guggenheim Museum in New York, you know what I'm talking about. You go up a ramp which circles, in this case, ovals, since it is an oval, the outside, or excuse me, the immediate inside wall of the structure. And on the walls are memorials to the thousands of IDF soldiers who have been killed in action. There were, at that time, obviously there's more now, but at that time there were 400 who died on October 7th, and of course many since that time. Parenthetically, the most recent ones that I saw, and I would have seen them on February 28th, were dated February 7th. So that's basically a 3-week gap, if you will, where obviously they're still making the plaques. And the names of at that time, the 2 most recent deceased soldiers were Hanan and David. And you must know that is my Hebrew name, Hanan David. So you can imagine, I tried to imagine the fear, the pain, and the anguish that they and their families experienced. I thank you for that. Carl, at this time, Carl is going to read some questions that have already been posed. I see that Stan Greenspan was kind enough to provide information indicating that Rabbi Peres's son was confirmed to have died on October 7th, and his body was taken to Gaza. That was not known, obviously, at the time and at the end of February. I'm very sorry to hear that.
Dan,
Carl?
thank you for sharing that, Stan. Alan, thank you. And now we have a handful of questions that I will pose to Alan that have been submitted earlier. And we invite anybody and everybody who has any comments or questions to use the Q&A, which is at the bottom of your screen, to submit your comments, and time allowing, we'll read those as well. So the first question is, did the Israelis that you met care about the support from North American Jews?
Very much so. They were very enthusiastic in wanting our support. You might say needing our support. I don't want to go that far, of course, because I don't want to speak for an entire nation, naturally. But for some people, they felt the need. Others, of course, everybody expressed the desire. Everyone expressed the desire, on the Israel high, we are one people, and that we support them in every possible way we can. There was a lot of discussion about different political views. You like Netanyahu, you don't like Netanyahu, whatever the case may be. But everyone agreed that at this particular time, that kind of dislike is simply not important. The idea is to support Israel regardless of your political leanings.
Another question, what are the plans to move citizens back to their homes in evacuated regions in both the North and South?
There's 180,000 people displaced by October 7th. It's going to take, as it was explained to me, it's going to take an extended period of time, probably a year or more, to get everybody back where they were. And of course, not everybody's going to want to go back. That's also a factor as well. As I understand it, there was a small community which was relocated, I believe, into Tel Aviv, although I'm not sure where. But anyway, they have stayed together. They are living together. The whole community is living together in contiguous housing and basically in condos and apartments. And they're still conducting the business of the community as if they are still there. They still have a mayor and they still have a town council and they're still meeting and they're still conducting business. So the answer is they have started to move back, but it's going to take a long time.
Another person writes, what can Israel do to have a more truthful public relations message?
This is where I will give my own opinion on this, and it's an opinion I've had for many years. Israel stinks at public relations. Every year, not every year, but every time there's an attack, every time there's an incident that doesn't even pale, that does pale in comparison to October 7th. I smack my head because Israel appeals to the intellect. You always have this rather, attractive man or woman standing in front of a podium with a pointer, and they're pointing out and they're showing pictures of, look at this, they look at the bombs falling and this and that. And then you see what Hamas does. And Hamas has some guy standing there holding what looks like a bloody child, which could be a fake, could be, who knows, could be Hollywood acting. I have no idea. And you have that man saying, look what they did to my son, and they're crying and they make it personal, and Israel makes it business. And I think that's where Israel falls down in the public relations war. And I am always upset by that, not just on October 7th, and not just since October 7th, but in all the instances that have happened before that. And I don't understand why, to be honest with you. Why don't they go for more of the emotion as opposed to the intellect? I do see that now, but it's not really coming from Israel. It's coming from our own American people, where I see, for example, we have an electronic billboard a couple miles down the road in a commercial area, and it changes its message every several seconds or so, and every third or fourth message, instead of advertising Joe the plumber, is a picture of a hostage, and it'll say Yonina, age 24. But interestingly enough, it doesn't say that they're an Israeli hostage. It says bring them home, and I know what it means, but I don't know that everybody else knows what that means. I don't know that everyone else identifies that person, that they are being held by Hamas. So it's something, but again, that's not even done by Israel. That's being done by Americans.
It's a really good point. This in through the Q&A. Recent articles report about 50 suicides and survivors of this horror. How does this speak to the widespread survivor's guilt that is probably quite prevalent?
Obviously, I'm not a psychologist. I can't intelligently answer that question, but I will say that if my loved one died, if I was a father or a grandparent and I lost a son or a child or a grandchild, I'd certainly have to think about suicide. I can't deny that. So I don't know if all of it is survivor's guilt, or perhaps it's just, total devastation by a personal loss.
I have a question, Alan. How has this experience being there and now having a little bit of time to sort of digest it, and that's probably not the best word for it, but to process it, how has this changed you as a person, as a father or grandfather, the head of a large organization? How do you see yourself having changed from it?
And I'll answer that as a father and grandfather, and that it has changed me quite a lot because, obviously I'm always concerned with my children and grandchildren, with my immediate family, with my loved ones, with my wife, children, sons-in-law, etc. But I see now how fragile life is, and even more so having gone there and spoken to people who have suffered losses and spoken to wounded people. Uh, and it makes one really appreciate, of course, life. Let's start with that. It makes make me really appreciate what I have, what we all have, what we in America probably take for granted a lot, that we are in relative safety. That doesn't mean that anti-Semitism isn't horrible, because it is. And certainly there's a risk there, and there is. But we don't live with the daily question of being bombed or being attacked or being kidnapped by hostile forces. And having not been in that circumstance, or having been in a relatively safe circumstance, we forget how bad it can be for others, and particularly when we're talking about our religious brethren.
Question that came in from the chat, Alan, what surprised you during your trip?
Uh, that life goes on. So, for example, I was sitting in the old city, having lunch, and just finished lunch. I was sitting in a bustling market area, and people were walking back and forth. And I was speaking with my wife on the phone, and she expressed her concern about my security. And as she asked that question, there were four young male soldiers walking towards me, and they were, I'm going to say, about 20 feet away at that moment. I said to her, "Well, you don't have to worry, because here are these four young, very fit armed soldiers with very big guns walking toward me." I said, "Oh, wait, it's only three now." One of them walked over to chat up a couple of babes. And that was the conversation I had with my wife. And it really struck me as funny because, hey, they're 19-year-old guys. You know what I mean? They want to have their lives too. And the handsome young man saw two attractive young ladies and went right over to them and made up started a conversation. Life goes on.
Life goes on, for sure.
I've been on conference calls where people have discussed the videos that have been combined for the October 7th tragedies, atrocities, from both the cameras that were on some of the Hamas terrorists, as well as other films that were there. And, they say it's unspeakable. It's horrible and this and that. But I think Israel needs to release that to the world, so everybody understands the atrocities that were committed on October 7th, and counter some of the discussions, that say Hamas is reasonable people and so forth. Did you talk about that in Israel at all, about those videos and releasing it to the world?
Not the specific videos, but again, what I had said earlier about not about being more, appealing to the emotion, not the intellect. We did speak about that at length, but it hasn't happened. Notice it hasn't changed.
Another question, what can FJMC do as an organization to help?
Well, I think we're doing quite a lot. And I think, Carl, you mentioned some of the things we're doing. First of all, we have the weekly toolkits. We're keeping our people informed. We have had letter writing campaigns. We have had, that is to congressmen and members of parliament in Canada, also to Prime Minister Trudeau and President Biden, thanking them for the support of Israel. And we can continue to do that. And I think it's incumbent upon each of us to do that and to make sure that our voice is heard, that that our congresspeople, our senators, our members of MPs, our prime minister and presidents know where we stand. Even if they're still doing what we want them to do, it's good for you to reinforce your gratitude that they are still doing it, because we want them to know that they have our support. Because let's face it, they might support Israel, but that doesn't mean that everybody else, that all their constituents do. And we want them to know that at least some of their constituents appreciate it.
Very true. From the Q&A, on the PR side, Twitter seems to be very biased towards the Palestinian cause, which drives much of the young people who use it. Might there be some approach to make this more balanced?
I don't quite understand that. I have to be honest with you. From my understanding of Twitter, it's driven by consumers. It's driven by the users. So when you say Twitter is biased, well, first, I guess Twitter is biased because now it's owned by Elon Musk. Before that, it was not. So I don't really know. I have not been on Twitter since he bought it, and I won't. So I can't really answer what it's like right now. But what it takes is, just in general, what it takes is all our people getting on these social media sites. I'm not going to just say just Twitter, which is now called X, by the way. All the social media sites, and constantly repeating the righteousness, or if you want to call it, or the rightfulness of Israel's cause, and hammering it home no matter what opposition you get, and you will get opposition, I guarantee that. But you have to keep hammering it home. If you have those, if you want to use those videos, as Eric suggested, great, whatever it takes, but make it clear that not everybody on X or any other social media platform, it feels that way.
There's a comment here, and I think a question. Yes. It's not just on Twitter. It's most of media, social and conventional. Showing innocent people starving. Please elaborate on what your speakers said about this. And I think they were referring to the speakers that Alan had while he was in Israel.
I'm sorry, can you please repeat that? I'm sorry.
Absolutely. It's not just Twitter. They're referring to, I guess, the uneven balance. It's most of social media and conventional media also. I'm extrapolating there. Showing innocent people starving. Please elaborate on what your speakers said about this. Well, basically, did the speakers that you were with in Israel, did they comment on all on social media and how unbalanced things seem to be, how one-sided things seems to be generally?
Yes, they did, but they were speaking from the consumer standpoint. They weren't really speaking about whether Twitter as an institution is biased against Israel. They were talking about the participants on Twitter and other social media sites. And what they were saying is, what I said a moment ago, is that we need to fight back against that. So when somebody puts on that, Hamas is freedom loving and blah, 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 we need to respond to that by saying, no, they're murderers, they're rapists. This is what they did to people on October 7th. So the answer is, are we fighting? And I guess what I'm hearing is that some people seem to think that social media is driven by the owners of the sites, and I don't believe that's true. It's driven by the participants in the sites, and we need to be participants, and we need to respond to them as often as we can, and not just respond, but take the offensive. If you want to call it the offensive, go on the attack and be proactive and put out information that isn't just in response to someone saying something, just put it out there anyway, just simply because it's correct and right.
Sure. Danny, you should be able to unmute now.
So it was my question, and it was hard to put it in written form. And what I was really asking, Alan, is you referenced in the beginning of your talk about the speakers and the perception problem. And, we watch the media, you put the 6:30 national news and you see people starving in Gaza. It's the Israelis, look what they're doing. And you have people, because of that, Israel's the bad guy. And you said they talked about it. And you also made a really good point. What are they doing about it? Is it, well, that's the way it is? Because it really is. It's so upsetting. It's so upsetting to live in this country and to see what has happened, and to feel like, oh my God, are you kidding? Are you really? But people will, not just social media, all of media. People read, the New York Times is the #1 publication in this country, and it's certainly not pro-Israel by any stretch. Man, I'm making it political, but it's a perception issue, and there is no facts. So I was just interested if they talked a lot about it or just kind of mentioned it.
It was more mentioned than talk. Again,
Okay.
we did have a forum where I was able to express my opinion as to what Israel's doing wrong in public relations.
I agree.
And by the way, I wasn't the only one who said that. It wasn't like I was the lone voice in the wilderness. There were several other people who voiced that same opinion, but nothing's changed. They're doing the exact same thing. They're still appealing to the head, not the heart, which I think is a mistake, personally. But maybe it's a cultural thing. I don't know.
Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. Another comment in the Q&A, perhaps it might be worth having a group of people join X or Twitter and make a clear effort to counter the many comments which seem to ignore. And that question just literally disappeared.
Well, that's okay. I mean, and that's exactly what I'm saying. Yes. So what I'm asking you to do is to join what is now called X, which used to be called Twitter, and any other social media platform you think is appropriate, and get the word out, get the truth out to counteract the lie. I don't know if it's lies so much as there's plenty of lies too, but a lot of it is just simply misinformation or misunderstanding. And again, a lot of it is caused by people seeing Hamas's emotional response versus, the Israeli intellectual response. We need to get out the emotional response. We need to talk about those hostages whose lives are not only already in danger and have already died. We need to talk about the women who have been raped. When I hear about women and they support Hamas, they don't know a thing. I mean, Hamas is so anti-women. That has to be known. I mean, I've heard it argued that, well, Hamas acted because they're under occupation, and they had, first of all, not under occupation, but that's what people think. People think they're under occupation. There were Israeli soldiers in Gaza until October 8th, or whatever. Actually, it was October 8th. Until after October 7th, there hasn't been an Israeli soldier in Gaza in many, many years. So they're not under occupation. But anyway, that's one lie that needs to be counteracted. But if you're a soldier, if you are fighting for your homeland, you want to kill the enemy. That means enemy soldiers. So all right, let's look at it from their side. If you're Hamas and you're fighting for your freedom, yes, you want to kill Israeli soldiers. If you consider this to be a war, you kill the soldiers. That's what people do in a war. They don't rape women. They don't kill children. They don't commit atrocities that were committed on October 7th and since that time. That's not war. That's terrorism. And that's murderers, and they should be treated as such. And we have to point that out on all social media platforms.
I agree 100% with that. I mean, we all have a voice. We may not feel like our voice is very important or heard that much, but if enough of us keep talking and keep sharing our thoughts, that will help the cause for sure. So we should all keep speaking up. Another question in the Q&A, do you have a sense Israel has a plan for the day after? The one speaker talked about 2 years. What does Gaza look like after 2 years?
Well, they were revealing that, of course. They said that there is a plan. They wouldn't tell us what that plan was. Now, maybe that's Richard Nixon's plan for the end of the Vietnam War, and he wouldn't tell us until after the election, back in 1972, for those of you who remember, but I don't know. So maybe it exists or maybe it doesn't, but that is the generals and admirals who spoke to us, assured us that there is a plan. Whenever one goes into a war, and we did that in Iraq, for example, people talk about a war plan. How are we going to win the war? Okay, and winning the war is great. That's wonderful. Like you said, what happens the day after the war is over? What happens after that? Afghanistan's a classic example. Great, we won the war in Afghanistan, but eventually, and this is what I keep saying every time America goes into a war with anybody, whenever it is, it's someday in the future we're going to leave. That could be a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, but someday we're going to leave. What happens then? Well, I think that's Israel's in that position now. And unfortunately, it's a terrible position because one day they're going to leave too. They're not going to stay in Gaza forever. One day they're going to leave. And what are they leaving behind? Unfortunately, now they have created, and I'm not saying that they had any choice, but I'll change what I said. Not that they have created. There has been created a new generation of terrorists. People who are now angry because their children have been killed or died or their fathers were killed, or whatever the case may be. They have personal interest now in wanting to destroy and kill Jews. And keep in mind, when they went into from Gaza into Israel, they didn't say kill Israelis, they said kill the Jews. And unfortunately now there's going to be even more of them because they've suffered a loss, they're angry, they're pissed off. They're going to they already are blaming the Jews. And one day they're going to attack again.
Another question, was there any mention of the threat from Iran when you were there?
Well, only in, only in the abstract, you understand, there was no attack at that time. Israel, Iran had not attacked Israel, of course. So it was mentioned mostly in the situation that Iran is the backer of these terrorist organizations like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthi, if I'm saying that correctly, in Yemen, the group in Yemen, whatever that's called, and others as well. So yes, they were mentioned in that regard. There was no talk of attacking Iran or being at war with Iran.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments at this time? Bob Watts has his finger up. Take that as a question. Bob, you can unmute if you like.
Thanks, Carl. I was trying to type this out, but it was a little complicated question. I was in a very interesting meeting this afternoon with the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Israeli and Palestinian Affairs, who met with the Jewish diplomats this afternoon. So we got quite an in-depth view of the official position on this. But I wanted to ask Alan, did you sense the Israelis agreed with Netanyahu and were irritated by our double standard that we're always counseling restraint of the Israelis in a situation where we wouldn't ask that of any other ally or country that was attacked, by massive barrages of missiles and terrorist acts?
No, that didn't come up. I don't know that that is the United States, had asked for a restraint at that time. Again, this is February 28th, we're talking about February 29th. It may have happened, perhaps we did ask. If we did, we, the United States, probably did it quietly. But no, there was no mention of that whatsoever. Obviously,
Okay, it hadn't come up yet. The Schumer thing and all that hadn't come
correct.
up.
Oh yeah, that had not occurred. No,
Yeah. Okay.
that had not. The Schumer statement had not been made at that time, so there, obviously could not come up.
So there's a comment in the chat, and I will read it since this was directed to everybody. As an Israel advocate of many years, I do my best to get out the message and counteract anti-Semitism and the propaganda on all social media platforms. However, since October 7th, I've been avoiding TikTok like a plague. Too much vile and venom. There is anti-Semitism on Instagram, but I come across a lot of fake accounts, otherwise known as bots. There's a war going on via the media for sure, social media in particular. There is. And I think we need to just use our voices and people that we care about and love with their voices to help combat that, because that's the only way we can do that part.
Absolutely agree.
Anybody else have questions or comments at this point? Looking for hands or gestures? I feel like I'm an auctioneer here. Creighton just touched his mustache. That means something.
He just bid $100.
He just bid $100. Okay.
Well, again, it would be much easier if you go to at the bottom of the screen, put your mouse at the bottom of the screen. That will bring up some various words. On the far right, it says more. If you click on that, there is something that's on my screen. It's the fifth thing from the bottom that says raise hand. I'll show you what it looks like. See what happens? I immediately move to the far left upper corner when I do that, and the little yellow hand appears in that corner. So if you can do that, that would be very helpful to me, or to anyone else who knows, who's calling on people. And Danny, I saw yours work that time. That's good. Okay. So that would really be much better than trying to get our attention otherwise, because there are two or three screens here and we can't see everybody at the same time. So please do use that raise hand function. That would really be helpful.
Okay, I'm looking at the Q&A one more time. I think we covered those. Yeah, I don't see anything else on here. Very good. Well, seeing no additional hands or pointers or gestures or questions and answers, I think It's just concluding, I think this has been a really fascinating discussion. Thank you so much, Alan, for sharing your time, your insight, your personal thoughts, and your wisdom with us this evening. And of course, thank you to our technical guru, Bruce Fagan, for making this presentation as smooth as possible. We always love having Bruce with us. And I also want to say that, just to add, that we're grateful to everybody who joined us tonight and giving your time to help keep Israel on your mind. We at the FJMC continue to be committed to informing our friends of current events in Israel, making our communities aware of Israel's history, and assist our friends to advocate for Israel. We hope to see you all again on May 28th, where we'll have our next webinar. Several people from the Israel Lone Soldier Organization will be joining us, including one individual who's a part of the program, as well as a father who tragically lost his daughter, who was a lone soldier in Israel, as well as possibly we're working on getting a lone soldier, either a past lone soldier or a current lone soldier, to join us. So again, that's May 28th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. If you have any ideas for future Israel on My Mind webinars, or would like to write a personal reflection, please reach out to me at krubin@fjmc.org. Thanks again, everybody, and have a great evening.
Thank you for this opportunity.